I've got a few rogue ones in this podcast, but I think Sturm Graz might be my roguish shout. Yeah, I think they could cause a few upsets, starting with Girona.
He says that advisedly because your underdog to watch is
Girona. Yeah, Milan fans, you're going to kill me.
That's a big shout. Not even to get in the top 24.
Maybe 25th.
25th. That's the best place loser.
Yes.
Hello and welcome to episode 1 of the Squawka Predictor podcast, in which we'll be previewing each round of the UEFA Champions League with a uniquely Squawka twist. That means there'll be some data, some stats, some insight and opinion. We'll even be using the Squawka comparison matrix along the way too. And joining me for that task, ahead of match day 1, is resident Squawka football expert and fan of 15 teams at any one time, Dean Smith, as well as friend of Squawka, Remedy. Gents, thank you very much for joining us. It is, of course, a new look tournament this year as well. We'll get onto the format in due course, but for the meantime, we're going to jump straight into a few key fixtures. The first of which is one of 2 repeat finals. It is Manchester City versus Inter Milan. It's a great tie to be leading with in match day 1. Dean, I'll come to you first on this one. Where do you see it going?
Yeah, it's hard to look past City in most Champions League games, isn't it? I know Inter's going to be a very tough game for them to start off with, but City are just imperious, especially at home in the Champions League. Last 12 games they've won at the Etihad, 6 clean sheets within that as well. I think this Inter side's strong, but last season they struggled away from home in the Champions League. They won just one of their 4 away games in the Champions League last year. So I think there's a bit of a gap in class. I think this Inter side's a strong one, and we've seen, obviously, with that run to the final that you kind of alluded to there, that they are capable of running deep into the tournament. But yeah, this City side is so strong, and they've started the Premier League season so strong. So I'm struggling to see anything other than a City win there.
Remedy, would you go along with that?
Yeah, I would. Looking at Manchester City this season, I feel that there's been something slightly different with them. It's like a new energy, a new revitalization. They obviously brought in Savinho. Doku's a year older, a year wiser. Foden hasn't even touched the pitch this season so far for Manchester City. And I feel that with Haaland just starting off in imperious form, yeah, I agree with him. I just feel like I don't see anything more than a City win here. I think City are probably going to go really far in this tournament this year.
It'd be tough to bet against them, wouldn't it? I was coming at it from a slightly different point of view. If you look at the progress those 2 teams have made since that final, 16 months ago now. For City, it was hard to improve on perfection, right? They won the treble and they've obviously won the league with not many points dropped. But Inter have come on so much in that time. They've won the Scudetto Atalanta. I'm still going with a City win because you'd be foolish not to, really. But is there much to be said for that Inter Milan progress, do we think?
Yeah, 100%, and I like the way that they play as well. The only issue for me is that I think it's kind of an issue we'll come on to with a few teams later on, that they tend to dominate games domestically, which means keeping hold of possession, which means trying to play through a low block, and they're not going to come up against that kind of threat against Man City. Inzaghi likes teams to kind of come towards him, like bring the press out and then play beyond it. And City just won't give them enough space, I don't think, especially now that they play with that kind of 4 attacking midfielders almost, like just behind Haaland. It becomes kind of a front 5, front 6 pressing, and it's just relentless. And yeah, I think this Inter side's strong, and like you said, there's been plenty of progress there. I think they probably will go ahead and win Serie A again this season, but I think there's a bit of a gap between Serie A and the Premier League, and particularly between these 2 teams, yeah. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, aside from that final, Pep has faced Inter, 5 times in total, winning 3, drawing 1 and losing 1. 2 of those games were, of course, the 2 semi-final legs in 09-10, when, I mean, I never know how to treat games or legs that their team has won. You know, that goes down in the win column for Pep, even though it was a loss. You know, the game state always changes that a little bit, doesn't it? But anyway, one of those 3 wins was a win in the second leg at the Nou Camp, which wasn't enough to overturn a first leg deficit. And then Jose Mourinho runs on the pitch and does that famous celebration. They didn't meet for 13 more years until, of course, the final. So there's not exactly much historical evidence to go on. But I just thought a reminder of that moment is kind of Champions League streets won't forget moment, isn't it? If I can call it that. Right. So we're all backing City. Are we going to put a score on it?
Yeah, I'm going to go for 2-0. And like I said, all those clean sheets at home, you just expect City to win at home in the Champions League and in every other competition, to be honest. I think, like I say, I think Inter will try and kind of play through that press, and I just think they'll struggle. One of the stats that I picked out was both Bastoni and Acerbi, the two centre-backs. They're among the top 4 in Serie A for ball carries this season, which I find quite interesting. It's almost like they're trying to, like I said, kind of draw out that press and then play beyond it. But you just can't do that against Man City, and I fear they'll pick them off. And like you've mentioned there, Remedy, with Haaland being so clinical at the moment, it's just so hard to look beyond City. So yeah, I'm going to go for a comfortable 2-0 home win.
Remedy?
I went for a 1-0. I kind of banked on the fact that Inter will be tough to beat. You know, in the Champions League final, it was a real slug for City to break them down, and you saw from Rodri's goal that the goal came from a cutback, and potentially we could be seeing something similar with Haaland potentially scoring off of a cutback. But I really do feel that Inter are a tough team to break down, so I went for the 1-0 as opposed to the 2-0.
I've gone 2-0 as well. None of us giving Inter a chance of finding the back of the net at the Etihad. But if it isn't going to be an Inter player, then any-time goal scorer, for me there's only one man, particularly given his start to the season. But aside from the massive Norwegian freak, anybody want to go for an any-time goal scorer otherwise?
I've gone for a bit of a rogue one. I mean, after kind of my Ukraine shout during the Euros, and I've got a few more rogue shouts coming as you'd expect, I'm sure. But one player who I've really been impressed with so far this season for City is Rico Lewis. Now, I know not exactly a goal scorer, but he has been getting further forward so far this season. He has a 0.63 XG from the first 3 games, so you know the chances have been there. He's managed to pick up an assist as well. He has scored in the Champions League before against Sevilla. Yeah, I think he's a player that this season is going to be one where we at the end of the season we're saying, wow, what a player this is, and he'll have really kind of established himself, I think, as like one of the first names on the team sheet for City, which is no mean feat. But yeah, I mean, it's not as likely as Haaland by any stretch, but I think maybe as a kind of value pick in the bet, and it might be worth a look, because yeah, he's certainly getting forward a little bit more this season, and yeah, looks more of a threat than he has done previously.
Yeah. Remedy?
Yeah, aside from Haaland, another one I probably could think about is Gundo. Now he's back at City. You know how Pep says Gundo has that smell for the goal, he has the eye for the goal, and I just feel that with how many ricochets, how many potential opportunities that City will camp Inter in their own box, Gundo can just feed off the scraps and yeah, get a goal. Yeah,
you know, I think if there's value picks, it's obviously not Haaland, but on balance, it is still Haaland for me. Right, key battles then. We're going to do this for each of these key games. I've gone for Rodri versus Nicolo Barella. Now, I don't think we're giving Inter much chance, but if they are to get anything out of this game, I think you've got to stop the metronome at the heart of that midfield, and I think Barella, if anyone, is the man to do it with his energy, dynamism, work rate, all the rest. Shout outs, I also thought for DiMarco versus Kyle Walker down City's right. DiMarco scored an unbelievable goal in the international break. I'm not sure that bears much relevance to this game, but it was worth a shout out. And also Haaland versus Jan Sommer, because again, if Inter are to get anything out of this game, then I think they're going to need something pretty good from their goalkeeper. But aside from me taking 6 players there, is there any left for you boys?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to kind of put how good De Bruyne is into words, but for me, he is still City star man. I know what Rodri's done over the last few years. I know Haaland's the man who scores the goals, but Kevin De Bruyne, like just looking through some of the statistics, last season, most assists, most chances created, most through balls per 90 in the Premier League. This season, he's already taken 12 shots and created 11 chances in his first 3 Premier League games, completed 99 final third passes. Like, it just points to an incredible player, but the one player that Inter will hope is going to stop him is Hakan Çalhanoğlu. Now, obviously, years ago, he was a very different player to what he is now, but he's kind of become the destroyer for Inter in the last few seasons. So far this season, he's averaging 2.89 tackles per game. He hasn't lost a single challenge in his first 3 Serie A matches, which kind of shows how imperious he is at the sort of base of that Inter midfield. And I've got a dynamic radar that hopefully Joe can put up for us on the screen now, which just kind of shows that his role is no longer to be that creative force for Inter. It's kind of to be the destroyer. And if anyone knows how to kind of be a creative linchpin, it is Kevin De Bruyne. So hopefully that'll be an interesting battle. I think that's where the game will be kind of won and lost for Inter, whether Çalhanoğlu can really contain De Bruyne's kind of creative majesty.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautifully put. Remedy, what's the battle for you?
So for me, I would kind of favourite into here, I would say Marcos Thuram against Ruben Diaz. I feel that with Thuram in the way that he plays alongside Lautaro Martinez, he kind of invites defenders into his own world. So with Thuram picking up the wide left channels, Ruben Diaz coming in to defend wide channels, which I personally don't think is one of his strengths. I feel that Thuram could get at him. So I feel that if Ruben Diaz is able to kind of curb Thuram on the wings or curb Thuram's runs into the channels, it could be a better chance of winning for City. We've already given City a 101% chance of winning, but yeah, I'd say that's a really key battle for me.
One thing that's interesting there as well is now that City kind of play with that three at the back, it kind of becomes a one-on-one battle. Pep kind of trusts Diaz to go one-on-one with any player, and obviously that's going to be Thuram's job. If Martinez can get close to him and give him that support rather than having to drop into the midfield to try and prevent Rodri from kind of dictating play, then it might make for a little bit of space, and it might mean that those other two City defenders have to drop a bit deeper, and that could just disrupt the balance a little bit. So yeah, I think that's a really good shout, to be honest.
Yeah, one thing is that it's the fact that Inter play with two strikers. I feel that we don't really see it as much in the Premier League, so it could be a type thing where maybe City don't go with the three at the back. Maybe they'll just build up in a 4 as opposed to a 3, and potentially they may have that extra forward in mind to kind of watch out for later on in the match.
Wouldn't be much of Pep to overthink it, though, would it?
No, absolutely not.
No. All right, well, that's Manchester City versus Inter. Let's move on to the next one. And that next one is Atalanta versus Arsenal, the Europa League champions against the Premier League runners-up. Remedi, as the Arsenal fan in the room, I think you deserve to go first on this one.
Yeah, I'd say it's a tough game. It's a very, very tough game. Arsenal going to Bergamo. It's going to be a tough game. It's on a Thursday as well, sandwiched between the Tottenham game and the City away game. So Arsenal are going to have to heavily rotate the team. We don't want to... Arsenal really have a problem with playing 3 games in a week. We saw it last season where if we were in Europe and had an away leg, the performance won't be as good as potentially what it was in the Premier League. But I feel that Arsenal have enough in their locker to get past Atalanta. I feel that last season especially, Arsenal struggled away from home in the Champions League, only with 1 win against Sevilla. Well, a poor Sevilla side, the Ramos Sanchez-Pizjuan. But I feel that this season, where Arsenal are in terms of the improvement, especially towards the second half of last season, I feel that Arsenal are in a much better shape. I feel that obviously it would be great if Mourinho could have played this game. He's obviously injured, but with Declan Rice, obviously he's had a week's rest because he is suspended against Tottenham. I feel that Declan Rice probably I think he's admitted himself that he's not been at 100% this season. This will be a tough game for him. Can Havertz take one of his chances? Is it going to be Martinelli or Sterling starting? It's a lot of different dynamics that Arsenal could be playing, and the main man Saka, could he deliver again on the Champions League night, which we've seen time and time again last season. But I'm quite confident, although I know you boys aren't as confident on Arsenal win.
Who wants to?
I'll let you jump in there.
Yeah, I've gone a draw for this one. I take all that you say, and I think Arsenal obviously a very good side, but Atalanta do, I think, have something there that especially at home will cause Arsenal trouble. I mean, you look at the way they ended last season. They won 6 of their final 7 league games. During that time, they also obviously won the Europa League. They beat a hitherto invincible Bayer Leverkusen side. And in that time they lost 2 games. One was the Coppa Italia final against Juventus, and the other was the final game of the season against Fiorentina, when to all intents and purposes there really wasn't much to play for, from an Atalanta point of view at least. So from that point, I think they're in very good form. They made an okay-ish start in Serie A this season. I think there's clearly some potency in attack. So yeah, I'm giving them a chance in this game. I know it's not what you want to hear.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you, James. I think Atalanta can take something from this. They've got a good record at home in Europe. They've only lost 7 out of 37 home games. I mean, that's over a long time. I don't like to look too much into the historical stuff, but last season, like you said, very good at home. The only team to beat them was Liverpool, and that was in a game that they were already basically through, having won 3-0 in the first leg. I think that Europa League game, that Europa League final is the blueprint for them. They kind of went sort of man-to-man versus Leverkusen, just really tried to disrupt them, and then sort of doubled up when it went into the key players like Wirtz and stuff like that. So I think it'll be a similar sort of game plan for them. I think like the Arsenal away record last season as well, like you mentioned, they lost Lens and Porto and Bayern. and drew with PSV. So yeah, I think I look at those results and I know Atalanta haven't had the best of starts in Serie A this season, but I just think they'll be really up for this one. And yeah, they've held City and United to draws as well in Bergamo over the last few years, so I think they can do the same to Arsenal.
Yeah, Gasperini's record against English clubs, he's won 4, drawn 2, and lost 4. Those opposition were Manchester United, Liverpool, Everton and Manchester City, so he hasn't faced Arsenal yet. Does that give you any solace, I guess? Element of surprise?
Yeah, it could be. We might just bring up a new style of playing on them, but I think just from my point of view, I'd say Arsenal kind of do well against the teams that like to push up on them. I know our team is incredibly technically gifted. Saliba, Gabriel, I don't know who will be playing left back that game, the likes of Ben White. I feel that we kind of do well when teams like to press up on us, because then we can just find little solutions out. I felt with last season, one of our biggest issues was breaking down mid-blocks. So we saw that against Lens, we saw that against PSV slightly, and definitely against Porto and Bayern. When they let our defenders have the ball and play amongst each other, that's when we saw issues, because we didn't have that player that can really unlock a stubborn defence from the middle or the first third. So yeah, I say Gasperini, if he plays like that, it'll be slightly easier for Arsenal. But if they sit in their shape and ask Arsenal to play through them, that's potentially where we have some of our issues.
Okay, all right. Well, who's your anytime goal scorer for this one, I'm ready?
I actually went for Martinelli. I feel that with Arsenal creating those, I would say fake transitions with Atalanta pressing high on them, it leaves the space for Martinelli to cause damage. I feel this season, a lot of Arsenal fans on social media, they've been like hammering Martinelli for his decision making, for his talent in front of goal, where I don't really think it's that. I feel that we just have to give the ball to Martinelli in more facilitative areas for him, and I think this game will be the one for him.
Dean?
Yeah, I'm going to go a little bit more down the line this time. I'm going to go with Bukayo Saka. He's taken 7 shots in the Premier League already. Only got the 1 goal so far, but obviously top scored for Arsenal with 20 in all competitions last season, including I think 4 was it in the Champions League. So yeah, like you said, he kind of turns up, doesn't he, on those big Champions League nights. So I can see Saka. Yeah, he's had 11 shots so far. Sorry, 7 shots so far this season. Just the 1 goal scored, but up against Isaac Hayem, probably who'll play on that side of the Atalanta back line, and I think he'll just be a bit too quick and too skillful for him, to be honest. So yeah, although I can see Atalanta taking something from this, I think Saka will be the star boy again for Arsenal.
That will be the kind of the dynamic of the game, or the talk around the game, the narrative of the game is that if Atalanta get something out of this, as we're predicting they will it be an Arsenal dropped point, or 2 points rather, or is this a more even game in your mind? You know, is this a bonus win for Arsenal, or is this a game that you should be winning in your opinion?
I'd say, especially at the start of the season, you want to be picking up as many performances and points as possible, especially we're coming off the game against Spurs. So we want to get that good roll or good momentum coming in, because straight after the Atlanta game is City away. Yeah. So I feel that, no, I wouldn't say this would be at the bonus stage just yet. Maybe the games in December and January, then we could potentially say, okay, rest some players, do this. But no, I'd say especially right now at the start of the season, we want to be picking up maximum points.
Okay.
I think it kind of it comes down to like what your expectations for the team are going into it. Especially like we'll come on to the new sort of system, but there's only I think 8 teams go through automatically. So I think if you want to be in that top 8, you've got to go and win at Atalanta. If you're thinking, well, maybe we'll get in the playoffs and take our chance, then I think you'll probably be quite happy with a draw there.
Yeah, absolutely. Goal scorer for me, I've also got Martinelli. And then if we move on to key battle, I think his battle down that Arsenal left-hand side, if that is, you know, where he starts, if he starts that game against the likes of Zappacosta and Martin de Roon, I think his athleticism there against 2 players who are on the wrong side of 30, no beating around the bush, could be where, like you say, that they're particularly could be where Arsenal makes some progress, particularly if Gasperini is playing in his intended style, as you alluded to, pushing those wing backs up the pitch. So that's my key battle.
Yeah, I've gone for one at the other end of the pitch, really. We've kind of touched on Saliba already, but he'll come up against a real talent in Matteo Retegui in this game. He's had a great start at Atalanta. He scored 3 times in his first 2 games. Didn't score in that defeat at Inter, obviously, but yeah, he scored 2 headers as well. So it's going to be down to William Saliba to try and get the better of him. Since he joined since he joined Atalanta from Genoa, Retegui's had 11 shots, 5 of which have been on target. Got the highest XG in Serie A so far this season, so it's all about that positioning for him. I think there are question marks over his ability to kind of make that step up. He only scored 7 goals for Genoa last season, and then he was kind of bombed into the Italy team because there was a lack of attacking options at the Euros, and then he only started 1 game. So I think there are question marks over whether he can take it up to that next step. And against Saliba, obviously he's coming up against one of the best defenders in world football for me. He's made 14 tackles in the Premier League already this season. He's won 5 of his 7 aerial duels, made 4 interceptions. Arsenal kept 4 clean sheets in the Champions League last season, and Saliba was a big part of that. So I think that will be the key for Arsenal here, to keep a clean sheet, for Saliba to have a good game, and to keep Retegui quiet.
Also, another stat, he hasn't been dribbled past in the Premier League just yet.
There we go.
Yeah.
Van Dijk 2.0.
All right, that's Arsenal then. Some discrepancy then, unlike in the City game. On to the second final repeat, I guess, in AC Milan against Liverpool. These are 2 teams that have only met 4 times in their history, which is quite something given their respective European pedigree. Those first 2 meetings were in finals, the first of which was that famous final in 2005, and then when Milan got the better of Liverpool in 2007. The latter 2 meetings were in the group stages of the 21-22 season. Across those games, they've averaged over 4 goals per game between them, but I see this being a fairly more straightforward affair in Liverpool's favour. I think you look at the way Liverpool have started the season, you look at the way Milan have started the season, and this is, at the moment, as it stands, a Liverpool win for me. I've gone 2-0. But how does that stack up to your readings of this game? Dean, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, I'm going quite similar. I do think there'll be a few more goals, and I think Milan will get on the score sheet here. They're very good at scoring goals at home. There's only one of the last 22 home games in all competitions that they haven't scored in. They've taken more shots than any team in Serie A this season, despite the struggles kind of in terms of results with 53. So, yeah, they've got a threat going forward, but I still think Liverpool are just too strong for them, and we'll kind of come on to why that is tactically. But, yeah, I'm going for a 3-1 Liverpool win here.
Are you ready?
Yeah, I went for a 2-1 Liverpool win here. I feel that there's been a lot of drama around AC Milan this season. Where I know we remember Hernandez and Leao when I believe there was like a drinks break. I believe that they didn't want to join the drinks break because they were subbed on late into the game. Yeah. Then Leao went on to score. Yeah. Tammy Abraham, he went on to score as well. So I feel that there's just been a lot of drama this season around Paulo Fonseca at Milan, and Liverpool have started the season incredibly well. There's been a lot of exuberance, there's been a lot of dominance about their performances in a way where they weren't really last season. So yeah, I can't see anything but a Liverpool win. Okay,
we're in agreement there then, but I'm going to bat one more time for Liverpool keeping a clean sheet here. Obviously they've done so in the Premier League with totality so far this season. But Arne, this is a characteristic of Arne Slot's side. Arne Slot's Feyenoord averaged the lowest expected goals against in 2 of his 3 seasons there, his last 2. The other season was his first, where there were still transitions to be made, of course. And they were still the second tightest at the back, at least as far as that metric is concerned. I think they carry that into this game. I do think Liverpool keep a clean sheet. But either way, Liverpool are going to win this. We're all in agreement there.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think it's going to be in the midfield where Liverpool really dominate here. I've been looking at some of Milan's stats from this season in terms of out of possession, and they really struggle to win the ball back. I know Francesca's kind of like a very possession-based manager, and he's just not going to be able to do that against Liverpool, kind of like what we said with Inter and City. So far this season, they rank 16th in Serie A for possessions won in the middle third, 16th and 16th for possessions won in the defensive third, 19th for long passes completed, which means that kind of counter-attacking element's not going to be there for them. They just don't have the ability to do that. So, Liverpool look to press out of possession and kind of build up patiently when they have it. And I think it's just going to be a case of like draining Milan, like death by 1,000 passes almost.
Yeah. Okay, so either way, we're backing Liverpool to take 3 points in that opening game on match day 1 at the San Siro. Who do we see as a likely goal scorer in that game for either side, given you are insistent that Milan will get one?
No, I went for Luis Diaz. I feel that this season he started off impeccably. I feel that Liverpool fans, again, you see on social media, we need to sell Diaz, we need to replace him, he's not good enough for our team. But this season, he started off this season with a bang, and just his ability to find a goal out of complete nothing, I feel that that's where I personally see him opening the scoring. Maybe Milan trying to kind of defend deep and Luis Diaz at the back post opening the scoring for Liverpool.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. So, yeah, Luis Diaz is my pick as well, but I can just back it up with a few stats for you.
Yeah, please.
So, 3 goals already this season. XG per 90 this season is 0.71, which is amazing, really. That's going to get you so many goals over the course of a season, isn't it? Expected goals on target, 1.02, higher than any other Liverpool player from those first 3 games. And when you compare it to last season, 0.4 XG per 90, 0.3 XG on target per 90 last season, you can see he looks far more clinical in the early stages of this season. So, yeah, Luis Diaz is my pick as well.
One thing, sorry to interrupt you, one thing I find super interesting about the XG stat is the fact that Luis Diaz is getting better opportunities to score as opposed to just... I feel potentially last season with Klopp's team, it was just all on the forwards to create for themselves. But this season with Slot's system, you're really seeing the forwards getting better chances. And could this be a situation where Darwin Núñez as well, later on down the season, he potentially is much more clinical and much more efficient in front of goal, only because of the fact that Slot's system allows for that. It's really interesting there.
Yeah, it's definitely one to look out for. I've gone with Mo Salah, which is, again, like Haaland earlier, perhaps the obvious pick. But I'm going to justify it with a couple of historic stats. He had 2-2 against Milan in that 21-22 group stage that I talked about, and has scored 8 and 14 against Italian opposition in the Champions League for Liverpool. Key battle then, I've gone Salah against Theo Hernandez. That's a bit of a placeholder for me because there's been some disruption, as you mentioned, both for Hernandez but also in the left-back spot more generally. Hernandez has featured once for Milan in Serie A so far this season in that berth, but Alexis Selemakers has also been there, and the young Filippo Terracciano, who joined from Hellas Verona this season, has also featured in that spot. I think that disruption alone, there being no first name on the team sheet in that left-back spot, ought to create panic for anyone who ends up getting that position for this game, coming up against Mo Salah. I think it will be Hernandez based on experience. I think that's the sensible pick. Who knows who eventually gets it. But if Salah can get the better of Hernandez, or whoever ends up taking that berth, as I say, then I don't see him not profiting in this game. But I'll throw it open to the floor.
Yeah, I think, like I've said, I think it's going to be a midfield where this game's kind of won and lost for Liverpool. And you can see from the passing networks from the United game, hopefully we can get that up on the screen now. You can see the way that Liverpool build up, and it's been interesting to see the 2 wingers kind of come deeper and allow the midfielders to run on beyond, which is, I think, why they're getting more chances, because they're then arriving later in the box from those deeper positions, the 2 wide players. As for the actual sort of man versus man battle in midfield, I'm going to go for Gravenberch against Reinders, like an old Dutch battle in there. I think Reinders is a player who actually really impressed me at the Euros, but off the ball he struggles. Like I said, I think Milan have kind of generally this season off the ball. In terms of the midfielders that Liverpool have, Szoboszlai, McAllister and Gravenberch, they've all completed more passes, they've all got a higher dual success rate, they've all had more touches, more ball recoveries than Reinders this season, so that kind of shows the sort of gap in qualities, if you like. So, yeah, I think Milan have rotated a lot in midfield this season. Reinders has played more than anyone else, so I think he will play, but he's going to struggle to cope with those 3 midfielders and Gravenberch in particular.
Romani,
I think the easy one I went for is Rafa Leao and Trent. I feel that Rafa Leao is Milan's best player by a country mile. I feel that obviously we know Trent struggles the 1v1, but again, a lot of people kind of overhate Trent for his ability in 1v1s, because I think he's much better than I think pundits or people in general give him credit for. But if Leao is able to create, if Leao is able to really perform at his best, I feel that there's no real option for Trent here. And yeah, Leao is probably my guy. I'm just a big Leao fan here, so yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely quite something, isn't he? All right, all eyes on that one then. Now let's move from I'd say some glamour ties, some final repeats, as I've said, to well, a relatively new entrant to the Champions League, or at least not for a while, have Aston Villa featured. They go to Young Boys on the opening day of the season. First of all, before we get into the weeds of this game, let's just talk about Aston Villa as a side over the last year, and even getting to this stage in qualifying for the Champions League. It's a remarkable achievement, isn't it?
Oh yeah, they've been simply brilliant under Emery and continue to go from strength to strength. I think they've done some really good business in the transfer market this summer. I think Douglas Luiz is obviously going to be a big miss for them, but I think they've replaced him well. And I think they can take heart from some of the Conference League performances last season as well. Like, obviously they had to rotate the team quite a lot as they were fighting for that top 4 place, but it didn't really seem to affect them. They were able to kind of play with that same like very distinctive Emery ball style, even when they were making changes from the team. So I think they'll look at the fixtures that they've got and feel that they've got a real chance of, at the very least, kind of making it to that playoff round.
How much do you think that experience of arriving in European competition, or the top European competition, having had to play so many extra games last season, how much do you think that experience will help? It's not like they've done a Newcastle, for example, qualify for the Champions League and suddenly they've got this many extra fixtures. They are used to it, and they've also got a manager who is incredibly used to it, right?
Yeah, Unai Emery is the man for cup competitions, especially when it comes to European knockouts. I feel, yeah, Unai Emery is the man. I believe it Aston Villa got to the semi-finals of the Conference League last season, and even though Aston Villa weren't at their best in the Conference League, it still shows in their first European performance, they got all the way to a semi-final. So yeah, when it comes to Unai Emery, I feel that his last performance in the Champions League as well, Villarreal got to the semi-finals, they got past Juventus, they got past Bayern. You know, the Liverpool tie was slightly tough. Obviously, Liverpool were performing at an impeccable level that season, but Unai Emery is the man for cup competition. So I feel that with the additions they've made this summer, Amadou Onana as well, I'm a big fan of him. Really add some legs, add some real quality in that midfield as well that they really didn't have last season. So yeah, I really like Aston Villa's chances of, yeah, at least making the playoffs.
Unai Emery's Villarreal that year actually faced Young Boys in the group stage of that season's Champions League. He won both of those games. I'm predicting him to win this one as well. I'm going 2-1 Aston Villa for this one. I did watch Young Boys against Galatasaray in the playoff round, because that's the kind of life I lead. Young Boys were actually there is some threat there, I think. They went 2-0 up against Galatasaray in their home leg, the first leg, and they looked for all the world to be completely comfortable in that position. Michy Batshuayi comes off the bench for Galatasaray, scores a brace in about 8 minutes, and it's back to 2-2. And then, you know, if discipline is the word of that game, for Young Boys having lost it for maybe 8 minutes, Galatasaray lost it in quite a big way thereafter, had a man sent off. Young Boys took a 3-2 lead to Turkey, where they protected it and actually added to it. Again, there was a mad sending off from Muslera in the Galatasaray net at the end. I quite like Young Boys as a prospect. There is obviously some Champions League pedigree there as well. Obviously not going deep into the competition, but they're used to European competition at least. As I say, I'm still giving Aston Villa the win. But I do think that they have something about them. They haven't started at all well domestically. So, you know, read into that what you will. But I do think that they are a threat that ought to be a threat that ought to be respected from an Aston Villa point of view. I certainly suspect so anyway. I've gone anytime goal scorer Ollie Watkins. I think, again, you'll notice I'm now going just for the obvious picks in every single game. So no value to be had there, but he was involved in around 30% of all Aston Villa goals last season, either as an assist provider or a goal scorer. And then a key battle, and this is kind of flipping back to giving Young Boys a chance. I've gone with Silver Ganvula, their rather large target man, against Pau Torres. And I'll tell you why. First of all, Young Boys were pretty happy to cede possession in that game or that tie against Galatasaray. They had just 47% at home and 37% away against Galatasaray. Insofar as to say they relied on counter-attacking play. Now, while they scored 4 across the tie and Ganvula didn't get any of them, he did look a threat, particularly from set pieces. And I picked out Pau Torres because there have been question marks in the past about his, I guess, athletic ability, his strength, his aerial ability. I'm not saying those question marks are at all justified necessarily, but Ganvula is a threat in the air. He hit the post off a corner in the second leg, which was converted. Unfortunately, it was offside for Young Boys. They obviously went through in the end anyway. But he and a lot of their other players, particularly their centre-backs, will provide a big threat, particularly from set pieces. And I think picking him out as a key battle, I just wanted to kind of highlight that they're quite happy to see possession, like I say, and hit teams on the break, utilise set pieces, and they may be areas in which you would unpick a new Unai Emery team. Perhaps. I'm not so sure. Anyway, I've rambled for a fair while there. So why don't I throw it open to you, Dean? Goal scorer and key battle for this one.
Yeah, I think I'm not going for. I've not got the same kind of enthusiasm in terms of young boys' chances in this game. I think they've really struggled. No wins from the first 6. So yeah, I'm going with a Villa win here. And in terms of a goal scorer, I'm going to go for Jean Duran. I think he doesn't need many minutes to score a goal. He hasn't started in the Premier League yet this season, but he's already scored twice. And he scored 3 times in the Conference League last season, despite only playing in 5 games, only starting 5 games, I should say. So, yeah, I think Jean Duran is always a threat. I think it's also worth noting that Villa could be a threat from set pieces in this game. Young boys have conceded a lot of set pieces already this season, and Villa scored more headers than any other team in the Conference League last season, which I found interesting, with 5. So that is a potential market to look at, maybe a goal from a header in this game. And in terms of a key battle, I've gone for Ugrinic versus Rodgers. Morgan Rodgers has been so impressive in these first few games of this season. I'm sure you noticed against Arsenal just how good he was. I know he was on the losing side, but wow, what a performance that was. And in terms of some stats from his season so far, he's got Villa's highest amount of final third passes completed with 20, highest amount of take-ons completed with 7. He's operating in those kind of half spaces on the either side of Ollie Watkins and Filip Ugrinić's young boys kind of enforcer in midfield. It's up to him to kind of stop that from happening. So yeah, that's the kind of battle that I'm expecting to make a difference in this game. But yeah, I'm really impressed with Rodgers. I think he's going to have a great season.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. But I kind of went for a rogue shout here. I went for a 0-0 draw. And so obviously I don't have an anytime goal scorer. But yeah, I just feel that with young boys, I feel that the display that we saw in the Champions League, I feel that if they're able to sit deep, if they're able to soak up a lot of pressure, I feel that they can hit Villa on the counter-attack. The one thing that I've always seen with Unai Emery teams is that when they face a team that are really compact, really structured in their defence, they will kind of find it hard to break them down. But I also feel that at Young Boys, one of their biggest issues slightly is that potentially that compactness isn't there. So I'm assuming that, okay, the coach, I think his name is Remen, I think he will be able to tighten up the spaces, tighten up the holes. We don't want the players like Onana, we don't want John McGinn, we don't want Leon Bailey. I know he is injured, but just of his ilk, those types of players, or Morgan Rodgers turning and driving at the Young Boys defence. I'll say that's a real issue that Remen needs to deal with in terms of that Young Boys, but I went for a 0-0. In terms of a key matchup, I went for their centre-back Zukru against Ollie Watkins. As I mentioned, I kind of alluded to it with Marcus Thuram. Ollie Watkins is another striker that loves to kind of delve into the wide channels, really stretch the team out. So if Ollie Watkins is able to get the better of his matchup, it could leave all that space for Morgan Rodgers to do his damage.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be a really interesting game, and I'm very keen to see how Aston Villa do in this competition. So there are 4 key matches to look forward to. Now it's time to have a look at some underdogs under the microscope. So in this bit, we'll look at 3 teams in the new format, particularly, who might go a bit further than people would have given them credit for otherwise, particularly in the last or former format of the Champions League. So Dean, I'm going to come to you first here on this one. Who do you want to shine a light on that might otherwise go unnoticed?
Yeah, like I said, I've got a few rogue ones in this podcast, but I think Sturm Graz might be my roguish shout. It's the first time they've been in the Champions League since 2001, so I think from an emotional aspect as much as anything, it's going to be, a really interesting time for their fans. But I think looking at the draw, they've got Dortmund, Brest, Lille and Atalanta away. Now, they're all tough fixtures. I don't think anyone would argue otherwise. But also, there's no Man City or Real Madrid that you just don't see them getting anything from. At home, Bruges, Sporting, Girona and RB Leipzig. Now, I think that's kind of the same. I think there's a lot of good teams there, some really tough fixtures, but at the same time, I can see them taking a few results from that. And we know with the current system that you're only probably going to need 3 victories to kind of secure a playoff spot. And I think within that slate of fixtures, I think they can get three results. So looking at kind of why I think that, they can keep things tight. So only conceded 23 goals in the Austrian Bundesliga last season. And what's particularly interesting is it's one of those leagues that splits, like similar to the Scottish Premiership, and they were even better defensively after the split. So I think against stronger opposition, that's when they play a little bit more deeper, play with a little bit more of a deep block, and they had 640 counter-pressing recoveries last season. Like, I know that sounds like a mad stat, but I think against those kind of stronger teams, when you're having to try and win the ball on the press, that shows kind of the way that they can set up. They've got a combative midfield as well. In the Europa League last season, they were 2nd for interceptions, 3rd for possession, 1 in the middle third. I think they're going to be really, really difficult to play against. And another thing that's kind of worth noting, they've got a really young squad as well, so it's kind of, I can see them taking that kind of no fear approach to the Champions League, and with that run of fixtures, I think they'd be right to. I don't think they've got anything to fear there. The Austrian Bundesliga, some of the teams from that league have done pretty well in Europe in recent years. Salzburg, for example, beat Dynamo Kiev and 20 in qualifying. I think there's the gap between that league and some of the other leagues is not as big as you might think at first glance. So yeah, I'm really excited to see them play. Like 22 years since they were 23 years rather since they were last in the biggest stage of European football. Yeah, I think they could cause a few upsets, starting with Girona.
Dean says that advisedly because your underdog to watch is
Girona. Yeah, I feel that last season, I was a big Girona fan. I felt that their story, almost winning La Liga, it was really fun to watch Girona last season. It was kind of something different. It wasn't like an Atletico, it wasn't a Sevilla, it was a complete underdog. And to be fair, the season before, 22-23, they had a really good end to the season. And what I usually see, or what we usually see, is that teams that end the season well usually start the season amazingly, and they just carried their form. Obviously, they didn't win La Liga, but they ended up finishing third, which was a really big achievement for them last season. But I feel that this season, the story is still there. They've added the likes of Danjuma, they've added the likes of Abel Ruiz, and he started the season off impeccably. Sigankov is also there. Obviously, this summer they've lost Savinho to City, they've lost Alex Garcia to Leverkusen, they lost Dovbyk, he's gone to Roma. So yes, they have lost some players, and yes, they are facing the likes of a PSG, a Liverpool, Arsenal, Milan. They are facing some tough games, so maybe I'm talking myself out of this, but no, I just feel that Girona this season, yeah, I feel that the story is still there, and I'm not saying they're going to finish in the top 8, but maybe 21st, 22nd, they can get themselves into the playoffs. So yeah, anything could happen with Girona, and yeah, especially with Girona, the fans also, huge atmosphere there, so teams going there. I know Arsenal have to go to Catalonia this season to face Girona, so yeah, it'll be a tough game for them, but yeah, I'm going to go with Girona.
I think this is the point about the format, right? And again, we'll come on to it in a bit more detail shortly, but you know, all of these teams have 8 games guaranteed. For Sturm Graz, that's enormous in and of itself. But to just finish in the top 4, the top 2/3 of the teams at this league phase, and guarantee yourself another 2 games, that's huge for a club of Sturm Graz's size, particularly. Girona have their own ownership security, let's say, so it's maybe not as big a deal. My underdog, the team to look out for, I've gone with is Celtic. Now they're not, you know, in stature, that they're not really of the ilk of either of your 2 picks. They're obviously a very well supported team, but they don't, or certainly recently haven't had a whole lot of European success to shout about. Now I've picked them out slightly because of their start to the season. It's always been a very good one. They won the Old Firm pretty comfortably. Brendan Rodgers is obviously back there and got them playing reasonably good football. But what I want to draw attention to most is their draw. So they've got, to start with, Slovan Bratislava at home. That's the pot 4 team. That is on paper the easiest tie of their 8, and to have that up front, I think, is a very big bonus. Then they go to Dortmund and Atalanta. Then they've got Leipzig, Club Brugge, Dinamo Zagreb, Young Boys, and then finally they're away to Aston Villa. Now, as a set of 8 fixtures, I don't think they could have done much better than that, to be honest. On paper, obviously, there are some big names there. Dortmund away ought to be the most difficult game on paper. But let's compare that to another pot 3 side in Lille, right? Lille's 8 games include Real Madrid, Atletico, Juventus, Liverpool, Feyenoord and Sporting Lisbon. Compare that to Celtic's run, it's kind of night and day, right? I think Celtic have got a great draw. They should be taking advantage of it. I think the only pick there of the 8 fixtures that might have been easier, again on paper, is Aston Villa away to finish. That could be quite a game for both sides, but by the time we get to that point in January, it will be. But I just think that's an opportunity too good for Celtic to pass up. And I also think, again, going back to the format, to finish in the top 24, you're probably only looking at 3 wins and a draw. Maybe 4 wins ought to be more than enough to get yourself, again, another couple of games. And I think you can be bold there and pick four wins for Celtic, or at least 12 points for Celtic across those 8 games. So I'd be excited to see what they do. So they're perhaps a 3 teams to look out for, going deep or deeper into the competition than they otherwise might expect. Now let's pick out some players who might be in line for a breakout season, or at least the lesser spotted names in the wider footballing discourse. Remedy, I'll come to you first. Who have you got that perhaps in 12 months' time we might be looking back on or looking at as a proper star of European football?
I've actually gone for Michael Olise. Look, at Crystal Palace last year, I feel that last season was his coming out party. I feel that this summer he could have gone to Chelsea, he could have gone to, I know Arsenal were linked with him as well, but he's gone to Bayern Munich. He's like gotten away from all the English media, the attention, and he can really get down to doing what he does best, and that's creating chances. I feel that with Leroy Sané, he's a year older, Serge Gnabry, he's a year older, Kingsley Coman, injury issues. So yeah, with Michael Olise coming into Bayern Munich alongside or in place of Desiree Doué, who was also set to go over there, I feel that there's a lot of quality that you see in Michael Olise, and I feel that with him like creating chances with Harry Kane, especially on a huge stage, like we forget how big of a team Bayern Munich is. They always reach quarters, semis, finals. So yeah, I say Michael Olise is the one. You can correct me here, but he picked up a lot of assists. He created tons of chances last season for Crystal Palace under Oliver Glasner, going over to Bayern in the German system, and I just feel that, I don't know, there's something there. There's something that you could really feel with Michael Olise. Something's cooking on the surface.
I mean, he's obviously not devoting any time to media responsibilities if his announcement press conferences that he needs to go by. He'll be able to put all of that creative energy into on-pitch action only. Dean, what about you?
Yeah, I'm going to go for, it seems a bit weird to kind of pick out someone who actually played in last year's final as a potential breakout star, but since it was only a couple of minutes, I think I can get away with it. I'm going to go for Jamie Gittins from Borussia Dortmund. So he only played 202 minutes in the Champions League last season, but he managed 8 shots, completed 5 take-ons, 109 touches. So he made an impact within those games, as Dortmund did in the tournament as a whole last season. He's had a good start to the season, came off the bench against Frankfurt and scored a brace recently. But I just think he's a really exciting player who can get the ball from deep, drive forward, so skillful, so fast. I've got some stats on his speed actually here. So his top speed recorded thus far, 35.97 kilometres an hour. Now, if that had been recorded in the Champions League last season, it would have put him in the top 5 for speed in the Champions League last season. It was actually recorded in the Bundesliga the year before, but don't worry too much about it. So he topped Dortmund's charts for open play assists per 90 last season and shots per 90. And successful dribbles 3.65 per 90, which is really impressive for a player of his age. Comparing him to some of the top sort of wingers in the game at the minute, and we can use the comparison matrix to do so. In the domestic leagues last season, Gittins compared better in terms of per 90 for take-ons completed, for fouls won, for ground duels won, and for touches per 90 than Rodrigo, Bukayo Saka and Mohamed Salah. So wow, what talent we have on our hands here. Even more exciting that hopefully he'll get into the England squad at some point as well this season. Nuri Sahin has spoken about having really high hopes for him, and yeah, I just think he's a major talent, and this is the season where he's going to really become one of the sort of big names of the game. And we've seen a few English players go on from Dortmund in the last few years. I think he's going to be the next one.
Okay, one to watch there. I've gone with Pau Kubasi of Barcelona, 17-year-old centre-back who broke into the team last year, but I think this will be his breakout season. I mean, there's a lot of attention on a different 17-year-old Barcelona player for a lot of good reasons, and I think Lamine Yamal is obviously dominating headlines at the moment, particularly after his European Championships. Kubasi just missed out on that Spain squad for Euro 2024, but he did go on and win Olympic gold with the under-23s in France. And I think there's something of an Ajax 2019 feel about this Barcelona squad more generally, aside from Lamine and aside from Kubasi. Marc Bernal, another 17-year-old who started the season, very unlucky, picked up an ACL injury, so he won't feature too much more. But there's clearly an intent there from Hansi Flick to utilise what is famously a very good youth system. There are plenty of great products of that youth system who, along with Yamal, I think will come to the fore this season. Kubasi, I think, will be front and centre. He's already holding down that starting centre-back spot so far this season for Barcelona. And I do just think that, as I say, a bit of the Ajax, a bit of the Matthias de Ligt, captaining that Ajax side at 17 what, 4 or 5 years ago now. I think there's a similar energy to this Barcelona squad, so I'm really excited to see what he might do this season.
Yeah, and I think we've kind of touched on it with some of our underdog teams in terms of the fan base kind of like connecting to a team that's been out of the competition for a while or in it for the first time in Girona's case. But I think it's the same when you have a group of young players that come through the academy. The fans are always going to connect to that. And we saw at Barca last season, I think that game against PSG, the atmosphere at that game looked like it had never looked at Camp Nou, and I think part of the reason is because they have all these young players who come from the academy. So I think that can make a difference. It's one of the less tangible things, not one that I've got a stat for here, but I do think it can make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So plenty to get excited about at Barcelona this season with all those young talents. Honourable mentions though, Dina, you've got a few more names you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, there's a couple of players I'm really excited to see in the Champions League this season. I'm starting with Samuel Mangula from Juventus, graduated from the Next Gen team over the summer, straight into the first team on the opening game of the season. Got a goal and an assist. A goal and a man of the match, rather, against Como. Belgium under-21 international, kind of plays either wide left or up front. And yeah, he's one player I'm really excited to see. And then one name that it's hard to look past, Ethan Mbappe. Very different to his brother, but just 17 and he's gone into the Lille team. He started one game and came off the bench in Liga and so far this season. Not quite the same kind of explosive, headline-grabbing sort of player, but very technical, very comfortable on the ball, and I think Lille will trust him in a couple of those Champions League games, so it'll be really exciting to see if he can start to replicate what his brother's done so far in this competition. Okay,
let's keep the name Mbappe in mind because it's time to find the flops. We're going to pick out a team and a few players perhaps that might not live up to expectations. Remedy, I'll come to you first on a team, please, that you think are going to let fans down.
So I kind of mentioned it already, slight hot take. I don't think Milan are making it through the playoffs. I feel that there's just so much drama going on at that club at the moment. Is Leao staying? Is he going? Theo Hernandez can even start a game under the new manager. And I feel that with Fonseca coming in, he wants to be like, okay, Pioli was there for so long. Now it's my team. I want to stamp my authority. So you're going to be on the bench. You're going to be on the bench, Leao. You're going to be on the bench, Theo Hernandez. And yeah, I just feel that with all the drama going on about the club at the moment, I know there's a lot of fan discourse at the moment. Is Fonseca the right man? Should he be sacked already? So yeah, that's kind of who I'm going to say is the flop so far for the Champions League, not making it into the playoffs.
Okay, that is a big shout. Not even to get in the top 24.
Maybe 25th.
25th. That's the best place loser.
Yes.
One thing to add is that none of those teams will be going forward to any European competition, where previously the third place team in the group stage would get into the Europa League. So no European football beyond January for Milan.
Yeah.
Okay. There we go. Dean?
Well, it's arguably an even bigger team that I've gone for, but I am going to say they'll probably sneak into the playoffs. I just don't think they're going to go quite as far. But yeah, PSG, I'm going to go for. I know it's always the rhetoric, isn't it, with PSG choking in the Champions League, and I don't want to kind of go down that route, but they've got a really tough group stage. So to read through it, they've got to play Bayern away, Arsenal, Man City and Atletico, and they've also got to go away to Stuttgart and Salzburg as well, which I don't think will be easy games, especially when you consider the struggles they had on the road last season in the Champions League. Lost 4 of their 7 away games last season, only won 2 out of those 7. I think it's a change in tact from them, obviously, over the last few years to kind of go away from the Messi, Neymar sort of almost French Galacticos sort of period. But I think that will help them when it comes to Ligue 1 and that consistency. But the same problems that have always been an issue at PSG, that dominating possession in the league, being used to playing a specific style of play, you can't then go and play the same way against an Arsenal, an Atletico, and Man City. So yeah, I think they'll probably, well, they will get in the playoffs, but I don't think they'll finish in the top 8. And one thing that I've kind of picked out in terms of the stats as well is their individual duels. That's where they struggled in those games last season. They lost 9.83 challenges per game last season, were dispossessed 9.17 times a game, ranked 4th worst in the tournament for aerial duels won. So I think those individual battles, last season they relied on Mbappe to kind of drag them out of a few holes. Obviously they don't have that this season, so yeah, I think they're going to struggle again.
Do you think that is a terminal problem for that? By the way, I'm going to go for PSG as well, but I can't really add to that. I think that the draw for them is really bad. Like I say, I think they go through, but not top 8. I think it's actually a big miss not to get into that top 8, not only because you save yourself 2 fixtures, but you also get the better draw in the round of 16 Beyond that, we'll come on to the format, as I keep saying. But do you think they are terminally cursed with this problem in Europe, as long as the opposition domestically from week to week is typically so much lower? Do you think do you think, basically I'm asking, do you think PSG need some competition in France to go further in Europe?
Yeah, potentially. And I think they'll probably will start to get that over the next few years. When I look at some of the teams in Liga and the way that they're building, I think that league will become more competitive actually, despite kind of the issues off the field in Liga. And to kind of bring it around to some more stats again, I think what's relevant here is PSG can win those games because they create so many chances against that weaker opposition. They can't do that in the Champions League. They have to be more clinical. They had more shots off target per 90 than any other team in the Champions League. They ranked first for big chances created, but they also missed the third highest amount of big chances. So yeah, that's not an issue when you're playing against teams where you're going to create 20, 30 openings during a game. But against those teams that we've mentioned, you need to be hitting the net every time. And obviously Mbappe was the man who did that more often than not for them when it came to those big moments. But do they have that player now who's going to kind of stand up and make that difference? I'm not sure that they do. And they'll need that against those bigger teams, which obviously they don't need that as much in Ligue 1. Maybe
to play devil's advocate here, I think we could say potentially one of the biggest issues with PSG, especially from the time where Qatar took over from PSG, is just finding a balance in the team. So they kind of had it 2019, 2020 when they reached the Champions League final. Obviously the format was slightly different. Then Neymar came. Neymar was already there, but Messi came. Mbappe was there. Mbappe's ego slightly grew. Neymar
slightly.
Messi was there. So they always just tried to find a good balance. And then last season, obviously, it was Mbappe's team. But one player that really stood out last season in the Champions League was Bradley Barcola. And you say potentially PSG may not have that one player to stand up. I think this season is going to be Bradley Barcola for PSG. I feel that their front line, it could be Colin Muani, it could be Gonzalo Ramos up front. But now there's a balance in that front line in a way that there wasn't last season. Ousmane Dembele probably has the right side on lock. Bradley Barcola's on the left. They have João Neves now. They have Vitinha now, who's a year older. I think there's been a lot of positive reports out of him from France saying that Vitinha is kind of like a captain material at PSG. So yeah, I think the schedule and the calendar in terms of PSG and who they're facing could let them down slightly. But potentially this season, it could be a case of, okay, the big man's gone. Now everyone else is there to step up. We saw it, well, at an Arsenal, we kind of saw it when Henry left. Henry left Arsenal, and Arsenal suddenly had a magical season in the Premier League and almost made it to the Champions League semi-final. So yeah, it could be another one to watch season for PSG.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point on Barcola as well. I think I might not have this off the top of my head, but I think he scored 3 times already in Ligue 1 this season. So maybe he is the man who's going to kind of step up and be that big player. But I love that midfield, to be fair. Vitinha and Neves, I think that's a great midfield. I think it might just be a bit too young to really dominate in the Champions League.
And a bit too small.
Oh, yeah, very similar players. So yeah.
Okay, there we go. PSG then, we're not too hot on, but you never know. You never know. One of these seasons, enough people will denigrate PSG and they'll go far and suddenly they'll be the underdogs for doing so. What about an overrated player? A player who will again disappoint or not live up to expectations. We've had a hint previously from yours truly, but I'm not going to steal the limelight just yet. Is there a player for you, Dean, that you think is facing an uphill battle to live up to the hype?
Yeah, maybe not as big a name as some others that we could mention, but we kind of touched on him before. An Inter striker in Lautaro Martinez, I think, might struggle a little bit this season, as he did in the Champions League last year. He only scored two goals last season from 34 shots, no assists, 5 big chances missed in the Champions League last season. So he's already struggled. He's had a pretty poor start to the season by his standards, and Inter are playing well, but I don't think Martinez has really kind of stood out in those early games. Yeah, he's yet to score, managed just 2 shots, created just 1 chance. He's lost possession 15 times in those first 3 games, so he's already kind of struggling in Serie A. Whereas Thuram, on the other hand, his strike partner, is really standing out as one of the star men at the moment. He's scored 4 times already this season, taken 9 shots, 7 on target. So I think Inter are a team that have got kind of an interesting slate of fixtures. I think there'll be games that they'll be pretty comfortable in. But I don't see Martinez being the man who kind of takes them to the points in those games. I think it's going to be Thuram, and Martinez might struggle again. Okay.
Remedy, what about you?
So this isn't a slight on the player, but it's just a slight on the team dynamics. I'm going to go for Jude Bellingham. Okay. So Mbappe comes, I feel that there's just something missing in that team. I feel that. So I had the opportunity to watch Las Palmas versus Real Madrid. I went over to Gran Canaria to watch that game, and really looking at that team, it was just a lot of dysfunction in the team. Mbappe wanted to take some certain spaces on the left. Vinicius was already on the left. He was housed on the left. Rodrigo, when he came on, he wanted to kind of push over to the left. And Bellingham, we kind of see his best qualities coming from the left. So I feel that it's not on Jude Bellingham, but when we see his performances, he's not going to be scoring as many goals because he's playing slightly deeper. He's going to be a lot more selfless in the team. A lot of people will say, okay, Jude Bellingham, he can't score goals. What is he doing in the game? And I don't feel that it's going to be his fault, but the Real Madrid team isn't set up this season for major success in the way that it was potentially last season or the season before.
As an institution, I get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
As an institution, there's probably no club better for dealing with a lot of big personalities. It's kind of what they're known for, right? With the Galacticos and all the pedigree that entails. But actually, I'm going to go along with you, not with Bellingham, but with Mbappe as a player to perhaps not live up to the hype. Mainly because the hype is so high and has been for so long, right? Like it's almost impossible for that man to live up to Madridista expectations, given they've been courting him for what feels like a decade. The fact that he's had to wait 4 games before getting his first goals in La Liga, that in itself should serve as a microcosm of the kind of noise that will get increasingly loud whenever he doesn't bag 2 or skin a player and put it in the top bins. I think he has got an uphill battle, like I say, to live up to those expectations. I could be proved completely wrong. He's clearly one of the best players in the world, but that wasn't enough at PSG. And if Real Madrid don't go and win trophies with the squad that they've assembled, Jude Bellingham, these are the kind of players that will be pinned up as the scapegoats in all to all intents and purposes. So he's my player to look out for, perhaps under delivering against expectation. Did you have any special mentions for this one?
No special mentions for this one, but I'm just going to disagree with both of you. I think Real Madrid are going to walk the tournament, and Bellingham and Mbappe are going to score in every round.
Right, just before we move on to the next segment where we'll be taking questions from our audience on social media, it was time to grab some food, and luckily Domino's UK have us pretty well covered for this episode. If you want to order in a Domino's for the first round of Champions League action across match day 1, then make sure you order before kickoff and get it delivered at half-time. Better yet, why not use the code on screen now for a discount on said order. Couldn't recommend it highly enough. It's with Domino's. We'll be powering through these fan questions, the first of which comes from at Zero Footy IQ. I didn't realise I had a burner of that name. But anyway, explain to us the new Champions League format. We've been talking about it all episode long. I'll come to you, sir, for that task.
Okay, so obviously the teams have been drawn, and the way it's going to work is, so unlike last season or unlike every season prior in the Champions League where there will be 6 group stage games, it will just be 8 league games for each of the teams. So think of it kind of like an NBA type of thing or an American sports type of thing. I know that this was brought into the Champions League due to the rivalry of the Super League on the side. But yeah, essentially all of these teams will face 8 games, obviously 3 points for a win, 1 point for a draw, and obviously 0 points for a loss. And the teams with more points, obviously they'll rank higher in the table, and the top 8 teams then go on to qualify straight into the round of the 16, and teams ranked between 9 and 24 will go on to a 2-legged playoffs. I believe that will be around, well, it will be where the initial knockout round used to be in the group stage format, where I think it'll be the mid-Feb. That's where it'll come back. Those teams will face each other, and then they'll be drawn against the top 8 teams from the round of 16, and then it will be 16s to the quarters, to the semis, into the final. As
we're familiar with. Yeah, it seems a little bit more complex on paper, but I think actually it's a format that I'm quite a fan of. I think you are as well, Dean.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I think for me, the Champions League was kind of getting to a stage where it's a little stale in the group stages. I feel like every draw you definitely had at least one team you knew who was going through in every group. So this just brings a little bit more jeopardy for teams, and I know it's kind of been designed so that those bigger clubs always make it through at least to the playoff round, so I understand that, but it also gives a lot of the smaller teams more of a chance to progress. And when it gets to the knockouts, it's a bit of a cliche, but anything can happen. So like it gives those teams a bit more of a chance to go through. I understand there's issues in terms of certainly player welfare. I think an extra few games is not what anyone needed. I think even us as people who love football, I think if you asked us kind of what was the issue we had with football, I don't think any of us would say there's not enough of it. Yeah. So I do get the issues around it, but in general, I think it's going to be a lot more exciting, actually. What
I really like is that it will, as you say, there's more jeopardy. There's also more opportunity, and we've talked about the opportunities for the likes of Sturm Graz, particularly given the draws that everyone gets. I also like that to get into that top 8, you have to be playing pretty much right the way through your group phase, as it was. League phase is now. You know, I've seen it written somewhere that you need about 5 or 6 wins. And then, you know, some change to get into that top 8, and therefore both save yourself 2 fixtures and also get guaranteed away first leg in the round of 16. And I do just like that it's not like the likes of City can power through 3 or 4 games in the group phase and then kick back because they've already qualified in top spot for the final 2 group stage games as it used to be. I like that they'll be kept on their toes right through to the end. I also like that there will be opportunity, as I said, for teams to pick up maybe as little as 3 wins out their 8 and still be in that top 24. And again, another thing I like is that 9th to 24th berth will also be seeded as well. So you finish in the top 8 of that 16-team group. You'll again get an away first leg for that playoff round. So I'm a big fan of the format. Alex_Nielsen97 asks, do you think this format will benefit a certain team?
I think team is slightly hard, only because obviously anyone could draw anyone, but if we look at some of the fixtures, the team that we know it won't benefit is a PSG. Like Dean's read out the fixture that PSG will have. It'll be a slog. It will be an absolute slog for them in the Champions League this season. But looking at potentially from the other side, I know Arsenal, we've kind of been lucked out. We've got some easier ties. I know we have to face PSG. I know we do have to travel to the San Siro to face Inter. But aside from that, I'd say our games are on paper. We can get through, I believe, all of them. But yeah, I'd say in terms of benefit, one specific team is obviously just dependent on the draw. But yeah, I'll go over to you, Dean.
Yeah, I think it kind of benefits both the bigger teams and the smaller teams. Like I said, I think it gives those bigger teams like that extra sort of security of knowing, okay, they might need to go through another knockout round, but they'd much rather that than finish third and end up in the Europa League like last season. But equally, you know, we picked out 3 teams before that we can see potentially at least progressing through that kind of next phase, that 9 to 24 group of teams. So I think if I was kind of a manager of any team in the competition, I would prefer this, because I think it either gives you more security of getting through, or it gives you a chance, whereas potentially you probably didn't in the previous structure. So not a specific team, but I genuinely think it would benefit pretty much every team in it in a way.
A set of teams I do want to make a call out for, and this doesn't actually apply to any teams in this year's league phase, but going forward, the likes of Bodo Glimt, Malmo, who both fell at the playoff stage. These are teams that play or don't play across the winter, right? They play in Northern Hemisphere summer because it gets so cold up there. And the new format will necessitate games a week before Christmas and in January as well. So not only are they out of match practice, I guess, because it's their off season, but also they're having to play in what might be brutally cold temperatures. So one to watch out for maybe in the years to come. As I say, not applicable this time round in the inaugural format. Now, in addition to a few opinion questions, I guess, we have some trivia ones as well. So at Big Smiller RX says or asks, for the first Champions League goal by a goalkeeper, Dean, as our resident football expert, do you know who that is?
I do. It's Hans-Jörg Butt, who actually scored 3 Champions League goals, all from the penalty spot, interestingly enough. And all came against Juventus as well, interestingly. So, yeah, there's been 3 keepers to do it since, but The last one was even Provedel, who scored a great header for Lazio in 2023. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
There we go. Right. At Smiso8202 asks for the highest conversion rate. Now, I know again you have the intel here, but before Dean reveals the answer, have you got any suggestions?
It would obviously be someone that scores a lot of goals. It will obviously be someone that, you know what, actually, it won't be someone that scores a lot of goals, actually, because now you just think about it, it's just someone who's doesn't really take too many shots, but can score too many goals out of it. I don't know, John Terry or someone like something so random like that.
So I've got the stats for last season. I think this season, we mentioned Jean Duran earlier. Maybe he could be someone for this season, but. From last season, interestingly enough, it was actually Alexis Sanchez who had the best conversion rate. So from players with a minimum of 3 matches played and a minimum of 2 shots, Alexis Sanchez, he took 3 shots in last season's Champions League. All 3 were on target, scored with 2 of them, so you can't really ask for much more than that. You've got to give a shout out as well to Castro from Braga. He played 4 minutes Champions League football last season, 9 touches, 1 goal.
That's a pretty good conversion rate, isn't it? Right. Question number 5 from at Wanna. How far do you think Bayern will go in the Champions League this season?
I think Bayern's a really hard team to call at the moment. Obviously, last season was really disappointing by their standards, although they had a decent run in the Champions League. I feel kind of on a sort of emotional level again that this season is going to be really difficult for anyone to compete with Bayern because it's kind of like the beast has been awoken kind of thing. My issue comes with the manager, if I'm honest. I think Vincent Kompany is a real brave hire from the club. Whether that'll come off, I'm unsure. I think I can understand why they've gone for it. The playing style at Burnley was definitely exciting to watch, but I think when we come to a stage where like managers are being picked up based on playing style rather than kind of substance, which is the way that it went last season at Burnley. Obviously, they got relegated in the end. Obviously, the season before was much more successful in the Championship. I think the players that they've got, and we spoke about Elise earlier, Harry Kane, we know he's going to score goals for fun in the Champions League. There is potential to go deep there. My issue is around Kompany. I'll say that, yeah, it may be one where we have to kind of reassess later in the season, see whether they've got that consistency on the Kompany, but I can see them going into the last stages. They always do. They always find a way to do that, and with the quality players that they've got, it's hard to kind of look past them, but yeah, I'm not sure they're quite going to be ready to go all the way yet.
Ready?
Yeah, I echo what Dean says. I feel that Bayern, they still have players, they still have top quality players. So, and one thing that you kind of see in the Champions League is it's less so about tactical fit or tactical setup in a way where you kind of see it in the league. It's more so, okay, can players turn up at big occasions, big moments? And last season against Arsenal, again, I keep going back to Arsenal because we weren't that team last season. But I feel that especially last season where we saw Kimmich turn up and score an impeccable header in the latter stages of the second leg against Arsenal, and we didn't really see it too much against Real Madrid. I know Joselu, he ended up becoming the man of the moment, but yeah, I feel that with Bayern Munich, they still have a lot of top quality players. Upamecano is still there. They've got the likes of Harry Kane, Jamal Musiala. We haven't spoken about him. He's one of my favourite players in the world. So yeah, latter stages, I don't think Bayern will win the tournament, but definitely a quarter-final at least.
That was going to be my next question, is pin them down to one stage of the competition. You're going quarter-final?
Yeah.
Dean?
I'll go semi. I think there's not that many teams who I think can actually beat them, and that's the only reason why. Obviously, in the knockout stages, the draw is going to make a big difference, and they might come unstuck against Manchester City, for example, but there's not many teams I can see beating them.
Okay, there we go. Right, next question from @Dju. Who's the best striker in Champions League history? Again, Dean, I think you have some empirical. We have an empirical pick according to the stats, but before we get to those stats, what are you going for? Or who are you going for on vibes?
Okay, on vibes, that's a great one. Obviously, you know, Lewandowski is one of the highest scorers. Obviously, Raul should be up there. Van Nistelrooy should be up there. Thierry Henry, I know he's got a lot, but for me, again, this is going off like personal preference. Karim Benzema, just on a Champions League night, you saw it at Lyon back in the day. You saw it at Real Madrid. Every single time a midweek European fixture would come up for Karim Benzema, he would always seem to turn up. And 2022, he almost carried Real Madrid to a Champions League title. So yeah, that would be mine.
There's a certain aura about him, isn't there?
There is.
Yeah. Dean?
Yeah, I'm going to go for another Real Madrid one. You mentioned a few there, but Ronaldo R9, I think. Just looking back at all those great moments, and I know like the hat-trick at Old Trafford is the one that everyone kind of remembers, but there were so many across a few different teams for Ronaldo. And I think at my age as well, at that point, it wasn't necessarily easy to watch kind of La Liga and Serie A games when he was at Inter. So those big Champions League nights to watch a player of his aura, like you said, yeah, I think kind of like really good Champions League memories of watching him. So yeah, he's up there. I think it goes down as one of the best strikers ever, certainly in the Champions League.
All right, those are the vibes picks. What do the stats say?
Well, it's another Ronaldo, as you would expect. If we're going to call him a striker, yeah, 140 Champions League goals. That's absolutely insane numbers. Really, really hard to kind of ever see that being beaten. Obviously, there's a certain man at Manchester City who might have an eye on that in the future. In terms of kind of out-and-out strikers, Lewandowski's at the top with 94.
There we go. Okay, final question here from @Anifawoshi. Saka versus Rodrigo, please. A comparison, or using the comparison matrix. We'll bring those stats up for you now. As you can see, Saka has the upper hand, but it's very, very close in a lot of metrics. Goals per 90 is the same. Touches in opposition box, nearly the same. I guess the question becomes, who would you rather have in your side going into the 24-25 season? And Remedy, I'm going to have to ask you specifically to omit any bias.
Okay, bias taken off. Okay, I am Saka's biggest fan. Yeah, like if Saka had no fans, it means I passed away. Like, honestly, I'm Saka's biggest fan. But no, I'd say with Bukayo Saka, I'd say for me, it's him all the way. Just in terms of, I feel when I particularly rate a player, I look at how much responsibility falls on their shoulders. And Bukayo Saka has been doing it for 4 or 5 years at Arsenal. And with Rodrigo, I feel that with him, what we've seen in the Champions League so far is him off the right, but his best position is probably again off the left, where he's probably third or fourth choice to play off the left at Real Madrid. So I feel with Rodrigo, he's amazing in tight spaces. He can get a goal, he can get an assist. But when it comes to Bukayo Saka, we saw it for England this summer, we saw it for Arsenal time in, time out. When you need someone to create a chance, create a moment, I feel that Bukayo Saka is that player.
Okay.
Yeah, I tried to take my bias aside, but it's tough, it's tough.
Well, I can come in with no bias whatsoever, and I'm going to agree with you. I think that word responsibility is the key here, and Rodrigo maybe suffers from not having that at Real Madrid because there are other players who can step up and do that, whereas I'm not saying Arsenal don't have that, but obviously Saka is kind of the main threat going forward. And I think if you swap the two players out, I think Saka would do a lot more at Real Madrid than Rodrigo does. I don't think Rodrigo would have the same effect on that Arsenal team that Saka does. The stats just about show Saka better playing for a team that didn't go and win the tournament. So I think that tells you kind of the difference there. I don't think there's a huge difference. I think they're both world-class players, but yeah, Saka's just on another level for me.
Does Rodrigo's role in that Real Madrid team change with the arrival of Mbappe?
Well, I'll let you answer that since you've seen them recently.
Yeah, I'd say with Rodrigo, kind of last season they had a really cool system. They had the split striker system with Bellingham kind of dropping in and going into those spaces. But this season, I feel that Rodrigo, there's kind of been a few murmurings of his discontent when the Ballon d'Or nominations came out. Rodrigo in his WhatsApp community, he said, okay, here are my stats. I can't believe they didn't vote for me. He went out in an interview saying like he should have been there. His agent also spoke about it. So there will be a lot of discontent from Rodrigo this season. Also with Real Madrid having the likes of Arda Güler, Brahim Diaz, who will probably start more games off the right-hand side than Rodrigo. I think this will be the summer where he departs 100%. I'm so sure about that. But yeah, it just goes into the fact that I just think he's not the greatest fit for Real Madrid at the moment.
Okay, well, it remains to be seen. Remains to be seen what will happen in that entire Champions League season, which is now upon us. My thanks to the guys for a preview there with Squawka Predictor in association with Domino's. And we'll be back ahead of match day 2. To recap, though, before we go, we're saying Milan aren't even getting out of the league phase.
Yeah, Milan fans, you're going to kill me.
And Dean, your biggest shout, what did you go out most on a limb?
Sturm Graz, I mean,
yeah.
Look, I'm not saying they're going to win the tournament, but they might
Well, let's come back in 9 months and witness the only man to predict such a thing from Sturm Graz. I'd be very keen to come back in January and see where Milan are. I think that's a very tasty one. Anyway, do come back for episode 2 ahead of match day 2 of the Champions League for more Squawka Predictor fun, and also get in touch with some questions and for fan questions. Thanks to Domino's for getting us through that segment, and enjoy match day 1.